The Bluetooth connected with that familiar chime, and my husband and #39's phone synced to my car speakers. I was driving to our marriage counselor and #39's office. The one Mark insisted we needed because, according to him, I was the problem in our relationship, the one costing us $300 per session that I paid for. Naturally, I didn't and #39 to expect what happened next. Ding. The text-to-speech function activated. A woman and #39's voice. I didn't and #39 recognize. Smooth, automated, clinical. Began reading aloud. And quote, message from baby and #39 can and #39 to wait for tonight. Told my husband I have a work conference. We and #39 have the whole weekend at the lake house. Finally, no more sneaking around like teenagers. And #39 and quote, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. The light ahead turned red, but I barely noticed. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Ding. And quote, message from baby and #39. Did you tell her yet? You promised. After the last time, you and #39 file for divorce. I and #39. I'm tired of being the secret. I want to be your wife, not your mistress. And #39. And quote, the automated voice was so matter-of-fact, so emotionless, delivering words that were tearing my world apart with the same inflection it would use to read a grocery list. Ding. And quote, message from baby and #39. Your mom called me yesterday. She and #39 so excited about us moving in together once the divorce is final. She said she always knew you married the wrong woman, that you only stayed because of her money and her connections. And #39. And quote, I pulled over. Right there on Michigan Avenue, I pulled my Mercedes into a loading zone and sat there, engine running, hands trembling on the leather steering wheel. The car Mark had told me to buy and quote, you need something that reflects success, honey, and quote, was now broadcasting his betrayal in high-definition stereo. Ding. And quote, message from baby and #39. I and #39 am ovulating this weekend. Maybe we and #39 get lucky, and I and #39 get pregnant. Then you and #39 have to leave her. She can and #39 to give you children anyway. She and #39 focused on her precious career to be a real wife. And #39 and quote, that one hit differently. We and #39 tried for children. For 3 years, we and #39 tried fertility treatments, hormones, procedures that left me feeling hollow and broken. Mark had held my hand through every appointment, every negative test, every devastating miscarriage. He and #39 said it didn't, and #39 matter, that we had each other, that I was enough. Apparently, I was, and #39 ding, and quote, message from baby and #39 packed the lingerie I bought, the black set. I know you said she never wears things like that anymore, that she let herself go, but I promise I and #39 I'll make you forget she ever existed. And #39 and quote, the tears should have come, but they didn't, and #39 instead, something cold and sharp crystallized in my chest, a clarity I and #39 never experienced before. I was and hash 3nine. Teet sad. I was furious. Before I continue, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment telling me where you and hash 3nine re-watching from. I love hearing from you. And if this story resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. My name is Victoria Ashford. I and hash 3nine am 36 years old. I own Ashford Digital Marketing, a firm I built from nothing into a multi-million-dollar agency with 70 employees and clients across 3 continents. I have a penthouse in Lincoln Park, a vacation home in Aspen, and an investment portfolio that would make most men half my age weep with envy. And apparently, all of that was and hash 3nine. Teet enough to keep my husband faithful. The messages kept coming. Each ding was another knife in my back, another revelation, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Ding, and quote, message from baby, and hash 3nine. Found the perfect ring yesterday. Tiffany, and hash 3nine. 3 carats. When you give it to me, make sure you and hash 3nine on one knee. Do it right this time, not like how you proposed to her at some random restaurant. And hash 3nine. And quote, he and hash 3nine proposed to me at Le Bernardin in New York. It was our 6-month anniversary. He and hash 3nine planned it for weeks or so, I thought. The staff had brought out champagne. There was a violinist. It was supposed to be perfect. Now I wondered if even that had been a performance. Ding, and quote, message from baby, and hash 3nine. Your sister texted me the details for the divorce attorney. She said, he and hash 3nine, shark, that he and hash 3nine. I'll make sure you get at least half of everything, maybe more, if we can prove. She and hash 3nine. He's been neglecting you emotionally. Lol. Neglecting you. As if you and hash 3nine the best thing that ever happened to me. And hash 3nine. And quote, his sister, Rachel, the woman who and hash 3nine did been my maid of honor, who and hash 3nine helped me pick out my wedding dress. Who and hash 3nine told me at the reception that I was the sister she and hash 3nine always wanted. She was helping him plan my destruction. I sat there for 20 minutes, listening to message after message. There were 43 texts in total, spanning the last 2 days, each one more damning than the last. Each one revealing a conspiracy I and hash 3nine been too blind, too trusting, too stupid to see. The affair had been going on for 8 months. The woman and quote, baby and quote, in his contacts was named Melissa. She was 28. A pharmaceutical sales rep. Mark had met at a medical conference. I and hash 3nine encouraged him to attend, and quote, it and hash 3nine. I'll be good for networking, and quote, I and hash 3nine said, and quote, take the company card for expenses, and quote, I and hash 3nine literally funded the beginning of their affair. They and hash 3nine been to Napa together. The weekend Mark told me was a guys and hash 3nine golf trip. They and hash 3nine been to Miami when he claimed his college roommate needed help moving. They and hash 3nine been to the 4 Seasons in downtown Chicago at least 6 times, always on nights when I was working late or traveling for business. She knew everything about me. My schedule, my habits, my insecurities. She knew I and hash 3nine gained 15 pounds after the last miscarriage. She knew I and hash 3nine D been seeing a therapist for anxiety. She knew I sometimes forgot anniversaries because I was drowning in work, and she and hash 3 D used all of it to take my husband. Or had he given himself to her willingly? Ding. One more message came through. And quote, message from baby and hash 3 just passed your building. Saw her car in the garage. God, I hate that she has everything, the penthouse, the cars, the life I should have. But Don and hash 3 T worry, baby. Soon it and hash 3 all be ours. Your sister and hash 3 attorney said, once the divorce goes through, we can drain her accounts. Before she realizes what and hash 3 happening. She and hash 3 will be so devastated she won, and hash 3 when T even fight back, she and hash 3 weak like that. And hash 3 and quote, weak. That word echoed in my mind. I and hash 3 D built an empire. I and hash 3 D climbed from nothing, a girl from a trailer park in Indiana, with a single mother and a dream to become one of Chicago and hash 3's top marketing executives. I and hash 3 D survived poverty, abuse, assault, betrayal, and heartbreak. And this child thought I was weak. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My makeup was still perfect. My hair was still styled. I looked like the successful, composed woman I and hash 3 D worked so hard to become. But my eyes were different. There was something in them I and hash 3 had never seen before. Something cold, something dangerous. I picked up my phone and cancelled the counseling appointment. There was no point. Mark was and hash 3 trying to fix our marriage. He was trying to run out the clock until his lawyer could maximize what he could take from me. Then I opened my calendar and started planning. If they wanted to play games, I and hash 3 D show them how the game was really played. Let me tell you how I got here. Let me tell you about the perfect marriage that was really a perfect lie. 5 years ago, I met Mark Ashford at a fundraiser for Northwestern Hospital. I was there as a sponsor. My company had donated $50,000 to the new cancer wing. He was there as a pharmaceutical sales executive, working the room with the kind of effortless charm that made everyone feel like the most important person in the world. He found me by the bar, nursing a glass of wine I was and hash 3 tea drinking, checking emails on my phone, and quote, you know, and quote, he and hash 3 said, leaning against the bar beside me, and quote, the whole point of a fundraiser is to actually interact with humans. The emails will still be there tomorrow, and quote, I and hash 3 D looked up, ready to deliver a cutting response to whatever arrogant networking bro thought he could interrupt me, and stopped. He was handsome, devastatingly so. Dark hair, green eyes, a smile that was somehow both confident and self-deprecating, and quote, the humans at these events usually want my money or my business connections, and quote, I and hash 3 D replied, and quote, the emails just want my attention. At least, they and hash 3 re honest about it, and quote, he and hash 3 D laughed. A real laugh, not the polite networking chuckle, and quote, fair point. I and hash 3 Mark, and I promise I want neither your money nor your connections, and quote, then what do you want, and quote, 5 minutes of conversation with someone who looks like they and hash 3 do rather be literally anywhere else Misery loves company. And, quote, I and hash 39. D smiled, despite myself. We talked for an hour. Then, dinner the next week. Then, another dinner. Then, weekend getaways, and late-night phone calls, and the kind of whirlwind romance I and hash 39 did never believed in. Mark was different from the men I usually dated. He was, and hash 39 T intimidated by my success. He didn't, and hash 39 T feel threatened when I made more money, or when my career took precedence. He seemed genuinely proud of me. And quote, you and hash 39 extraordinary. And quote, he and hash 39 D told me on our 10th date, at a quiet Italian restaurant in Old Town. And quote, I and hash 39 V never met anyone like you. You and hash 39 Redriven and brilliant, and you don and hash 39 T apologize for taking up space in the world. That and hash 39 S. That and hash 39 S. Incredible. And quote, 6 months later, we were engaged. A year after that, married. The wedding was everything I and hash 39 D never let myself want. 400 guests at the Chicago Botanic Garden. A dress that cost more than my first car. A reception that made the society pages. Mark and hash 39 S family. His mother, Patricia, his father, Robert, his sister, Rachel, had welcomed me with open arms. And quote, you and hash 39 the best thing that ever happened to our son. And quote, Patricia had told me, hugging me at the rehearsal dinner. And quote, he needed someone strong, someone who could push him to be better. And quote, I and hash 39 felt like I and hash 39 finally found my family. My mother had died 2 years earlier, and I had no siblings. Mark and hash 39 S family filled that void. Holiday dinners at their house in Winnetka. Summer barbecues. Birthday celebrations. I and hash 39 D belonged somewhere. The first year of marriage was good. We traveled Paris, Tokyo, Barcelona. We renovated the penthouse I and hash 39 D bought before we met, turning it into and quote, our and quote, space. We talked about children, about the future, about building a life together. Mark and hash 39 say. Pharmaceutical sales career was solid, but not spectacular. He made decent money, around $120,000 a year with commissions, but it paled in comparison to what I was earning. My company was exploding. We and hash 39 we'd gone from 15 employees to 45 in 2 years. Revenue had tripled. And quote, I and hash 39 am so proud of you. And quote, Mark would say, watching me work late into the night. And quote, you and hash 39 going to change the world. And quote, but looking back now, with the clarity that betrayal brings, I could see the cracks, the moments I and hash 39 D explained away or ignored completely. The way he and hash 39 D asked me to add him to my bank accounts and quote, just in case something happens. And quote, I and hash 39 D hesitated, some instinct warning me, but he and hash 39 D looked hurt. And quote, we and hash 39 remarried. Victoria, married. Couples share everything. Don and hash 39 T you trust me. And quote, so I and hash 39 D done it. Added him as a joint account holder on my personal checking account. Not my business accounts. I was, and hash 39 T. That foolish, but enough that he could access money whenever he needed it. The way he and hash 39 D encouraged me to put both our names on the penthouse deed when we refinanced, and quote, it and hash 39 S our home, and quote, he and hash 39 D said, and quote, not yours, not mine, ours, and quote, his name went on the deed, 50-50 ownership, even though I and hash 39 D bought it years before we met, even though every mortgage payment came from my accounts, the way his family had started asking for money, small amounts at first. His mother needed help with property taxes. His father and hash 39 S car broke down. His sister was between jobs. Could we help? Just this once? I and hash 39 D helped every time, because that and hash 39 is what family did. By year 3 of our marriage, I and hash 39 D and quote, loaned and quote, them over $80,000. None of it was ever repaid. When I and hash 39 Dodd gently brought it up once, Mark had gotten defensive, and quote, they and hash 39 family, Victoria, they helped raise me. The least we can do is help them when they need it. Or is your money so precious you can and hash 39 T spare a little for the people who made me who I am, and quote, the guilt had worked. I and hash 39 D stopped asking about repayment. The fertility struggles had started in year 2. We and hash 39 D tried naturally for 6 months, then sought medical help. The doctors ran tests. Everything looked normal, they said. Sometimes these things just took time. Month after month, negative tests. Then a positive one, briefly, that ended in miscarriage at 7 weeks. Then another miscarriage at 9 weeks. Then a third that sent me to the emergency room, hemorrhaging and terrified. Mark had been there for all of it, holding my hand during procedures, bringing me flowers after each disappointment, telling me we had time, that it would happen when it was meant to happen, and quote, you work too much, and quote, he and hash 39 D said gently after the third miscarriage, and quote, the stress is, and hash 39 D good for you. Maybe you should step back from the company for a while. Focus on us, on getting pregnant, and quote, I and hash 39 D considered it. But my company was my identity. I and hash 39 D built it with my own hands, my own vision. Stepping back felt like losing myself. And quote, I and hash 39 will cut back on hours. And quote, I and hash 39 D promised. And quote, delegate more. But I can and hash 39 T leave entirely. Not now. And quote, he and hash 39 D nodded, kissed my forehead, and quote, whatever you think is best, and quote, but his eyes had been distant, disappointed. The distance had grown slowly, so gradually I barely noticed. Date nights became less frequent. Sex became perfunctory, scheduled around ovulation windows. Conversations became logistics. Who was picking up dry cleaning? What time was the dinner reservation? Did we need to RSVP to his sister and hash 39's party? He started traveling more for work. 3-day conferences became 4-day trips. Weekend seminars, training sessions, and quote, the company and hash 39's really pushing us to network more, and quote, he and hash 39 D explained, and quote, build relationships with doctors and hospital administrators. It and hash 39's exhausting, but it and hash 39's necessary. and quote, I and hash 3nine, D believed him, encouraged him, even, and quote, do what you need to do, I and hash 3nine will be here, and quote. He and hash 3nine, D started going to the gym more often. Not the gym in our building, no. He and hash 3nine, D joined an expensive private gym in River North, and quote, better equipment, and quote. He and hash 3nine, D said, and quote, and it and hash 3nine, S right by office, so I can work out during lunch, and quote. His body had changed, leaner, more muscular. I and hash 3nine, D complimented him, pleased he was taking care of himself. Now I wondered who he was getting in shape for. His phone habits had shifted too. He and hash 3nine had always been attached to his phone. Salespeople lived on their devices, but it became obsessive. He took it everywhere. The bathroom, the kitchen, the bedroom, screen always facing down, notifications silenced, password protected, and quote, why do you need a password, and quote. I and hash 3nine, D asked once, lightly, trying not to sound accusatory, and quote. We and hash 3nine, married, we Don and hash 3nine, T have secrets, and quote, privacy isn't and hash 3nine, T the same as secrets, and quote. He and hash 3nine, D replied, not looking up from whatever he was typing, and quote. I have work stuff on here, client information, HIPAA-protected medical data. I can, and hash 3nine, T risk someone seeing something they should, and hash 3nine, T, and quote. It made sense. I and hash 3nine, D let it go. 3 months ago, he and hash 3nine, D suggested marriage counseling, and quote, I think we need help, and quote. He and hash 3nine, D said over dinner at Gibson, and hash 3nine, S and quote. We and hash 3nine, drifting apart. I Don and hash 3nine, don't want to lose you, Victoria. I Don and hash 3nine, to want to lose us, and quote. I and hash 3nine, D agreed immediately, hopeful that he was willing to fight for our marriage. We and hash 3nine, D found Dr. Sarah Chen, a therapist specializing in couples work, $300 per session, twice a month. In those sessions, Mark had painted a picture of me as a workaholic who prioritized her career over her marriage. Someone who was emotionally unavailable, physically distant, who and hash 3nine, D let herself go since the miscarriages. Dr. Chen had listened with professional neutrality, then turned to me, and quote, Victoria, how do you respond to what Mark and hash 3nine S sharing, and quote. I and hash 3nine, D tried to explain my perspective. Yes, I worked hard, but I and hash 3nine, D built a company from nothing. Yes, the fertility struggles had taken a toll, but I was trying. Yes, I and hash 3nine, D gained some weight, but I and hash 3nine, D been through trauma. Din and hash 3nine, T that deserve compassion, and quote. I hear you saying you and hash 3nine, retrying, and quote. Dr. Chen had said gently, and quote. But are you trying in ways Mark can receive? Are you speaking his love language? And quote. Love languages, emotional bids, quality time. The therapy buzzwords had felt like indictments. Every session left me feeling like I was failing, like I was the problem, like if I just tried harder, everything would be okay. Mark had seemed frustrated too. And, quote, I Don and hash 3nine know if she can change, and quote. He and hash 3nine Node told Dr. Chen 2 weeks ago. And quote, I don and hash 3 know if she even wants to. She and hash 3 married to her job, not to me. And quote. That and hash 3 s not fair. And quote. I and hash 3 de protested. And quote. I and hash 3 am here on and hash 3 de tie. I and hash 3 am showing up. I and hash 3 am trying to make this work. And quote. Are you though? And quote. His voice had been sharp. And quote. Because from where I and hash 3 am sitting, you and hash 3 regoing through the motions. Your body and hash 3 s here, but your mind is always somewhere else. Always thinking about the next campaign, the next client, the next deal. When and hash 3 s the last time you asked about my day? When and hash 3 s the last time you touched me without it being about trying to get pregnant? And quote. The session had ended with Dr. Chen assigning, and quote, homework. And quote. We were supposed to have a date night, phones off, fully present with each other. We never did it. That was 3 days ago. And now, sitting in my car with his text messages to his mistress still echoing in my head, I understood. The therapy was, and hash 3 about fixing our marriage. It was about building his case for the divorce, creating a paper trail that showed he and hash 3 tried, that I was the problem, that leaving me was justified. The first real crack appeared 6 weeks ago, though I didn't, and hash 3 didn't recognize it at the time. I and hash 3 come home early from a client dinner. The CEO had food poisoning, and we and hash 3 rescheduled and found Mark in his study, on the phone. The door was closed, which was unusual. He usually left it open, unless he was on a work call about sensitive contracts. I and hash 3 knocked softly and opened the door. And quote, hey, I and hash 3 am home early. Want to, and quote. He and hash 3 spun around, face flushed, and ended the call abruptly. And quote, I have to go. Talk later. And quote. Then to me, too quickly. And quote. Hey, yeah, I and hash 3 am just finishing up some work calls. Give me 10 minutes. And quote. And quote. Who was that? And quote. Client. We and hash 3 retrying to land a big hospital account. It and hash 3 s complicated. And quote. On a Friday night at 9 p.m. And quote. Doctors keep weird hours. And quote. He and hash 3 stood up, kissed my cheek. And quote. I and hash 3 will be out in a minute. Why Don and hash 3 you get comfortable? We can watch that show you wanted to see. And quote. But when he and hash 3 emerged, 15 minutes later, he and hash 3 being distracted, kept checking his phone. When I and hash 3 asked if everything was okay, he and hash 3 snapped at me. And quote. Can you not interrogate me for 5 seconds? I had a long day. I and hash 3 am trying to relax. And quote. I and hash 3 apologized, retreated to the bedroom, told myself I was being paranoid, clingy, exactly what he and hash 3 accused me of being in therapy. The next crack came 2 weeks after that. Mark had told me he had a pharmaceutical conference in Atlanta. 3 days, Thursday through Saturday. I and #3nine. D helped him pack, reminded him to bring his phone charger, kissed him goodbye. Saturday afternoon, I and #3nine. D gotten a text from his college friend Derek, and quote, "Tell Mark congrats on the promotion. Drinks on him next time we," and #3nine. "Re all in town," and quote, "Promotion." Mark hadn't #3nine. T mentioned a promotion. I and #3nine. D texted him, and quote, "Derek says, congrats. What? Promotion?" And quote, 3 hours passed before he responded, and quote, "It and #3nine. S not official yet. Din and #3nine. Twant to jinx it by talking about it too soon. Derek and #3nine. S an idiot for mentioning it." And quote, but something felt off. I and #3nine. D called his office the following Monday, pretending I needed to reach him about dinner plans, and quote, "Oh, Mark and #3nine. S been out of the office for sales calls all week," and quote, his assistant said cheerfully, and quote, "He and #3nine is not due back until tomorrow. Can I take a message?" And quote, "Sales calls, not a conference." I and #3nine. D let it slide. Maybe he and #3nine. D combined sales calls with the conference. Maybe he and #3nine. D gotten his wires crossed when explaining his schedule. Maybe I was being paranoid, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Then, 3 weeks ago, his credit card statement had come to the house. We got separate cards. He insisted on maintaining some financial independence, but the bills came to our address. I had an #3nine. Dunt meant to look, but the envelope was open on the kitchen counter, the statement partially visible. My eyes caught on a line item, and quote, "Tiffany and Amp Co. $8,450, and quote, $8,000 at Tiffany and #3nine. S. I didn't and #3nine. Didn't have any new jewelry. Our anniversary was, and #3nine. Done for another 4 months. My birthday had passed without any gifts from Tiffany and #3nine. S. When I and #3nine asked him about it casually, and quote, "Saw you made a big purchase at Tiffany and #3nine. Early anniversary shopping," and quote, he and #3nine. D barely looked up from his laptop, and quote, "Client gift. The head of cardiology at Northwestern. His wife and #3nine. S birthday. Building relationships." And quote, $8,000 is a lot for a client gift. And quote, it and #3nine. S. A $40 million account. Victoria. And quote, his tone was sharp. And quote, "The gift is an investment. You of all people should understand ROI." And quote, I and #3nine. D felt stupid for questioning him. Of course, he knew how to manage client relationships. That was his job. But $8,000. I and #3nine. D pushed it down, that little voice insisting something was wrong. I and #3nine. D been so focused on saving our marriage, on being less, and quote, workaholic, Victoria, and quote, and more present, that I and #3nine. D ignored every instinct screaming at me, until today, until the messages, until the truth came flooding through my car speakers in automated clarity. I sat there in that loading zone, hazards blinking, watching traffic flow past on Michigan Avenue. People hurried by with their lives intact, their marriages presumably not crumbling, their spouses not actively plotting to destroy them. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. and quote, running late tonight, client dinner, Don and hash 3 T wait up, and quote, another lie. I was certain now. I pulled up my husband and hash 39's location on Find My Friends, a feature he and hash 39 D suggested we both activate, and quote, for safety, and quote, after I and hash 39 D once gotten a flat tire on a dark road. His dot was stationary at an address in River North. I Google it. The address was a luxury apartment building, 3 blocks from that expensive gym. He and hash 3 Day joined. My hands were steady as I put the car in drive and pulled back into traffic. I was, and hash 3 T going to counseling. I was, and hash 3 Dote going home. I was going to that address to see with my own eyes what my husband was doing when he thought I was too busy, too distracted, too weak to notice. The building had a doorman. I could, and hash 3 just walk in. So I parked across the street and waited. 10 minutes passed. 20. 30. Then the door opened, and Mark stepped out. He was, and hash 3 Teat, alone. She was younger than I, and hash 3 Dad, expected. Pretty, but not beautiful. Blonde hair, in loose waves, wearing yoga pants, and one of Mark and hash 3 Northwestern sweatshirts, the one I and hash 3 D bought him for his birthday last year. They stood in the doorway, and he kissed her. Not a quick peck, a real kiss, the kind you give someone you can, and hash 3 to get enough of. His hand cupped her face, her arms wrapped around his waist. I watched from my car, and that cold thing in my chest grew colder, harder. When they finally separated, she waved and went back inside. Mark pulled out his phone and started typing. Ding, and quote, message from Mark and hash 3 already miss you. Tonight was amazing. I love you. And hash 3 and quote, he loved her. He and hash 3 D stopped saying those words to me months ago. I and hash 3 D noticed, but I and hash 3 D explained it away. We and hash 3 D been married 5 years. People got comfortable. They didn't, and hash 3 T need to say it constantly, but he was saying it to her constantly. In texts I was now privy to because of a stupid car, Bluetooth sync, and my husband and hash 3 carelessness. Mark got into his Audi, the one I and hash 3 Dud co-signed for when his credit wasn't, and hash 3 Dud good enough, and Dud co-signed, drove away. I didn't, and hashed 3 T follow him. I sat there in my car and made a decision. I was, and hash 3 to going to cry. I was, and hash 3 to going to beg. I was, and hash 3 to going to play the wounded wife, hoping he, and hash 3 to going to play the wounded, realize his mistake, and come back to me. I was going to destroy him, methodically, completely, the way you destroy anything that threatens something you and hash 3 V built. He thought I was weak. He thought I, and hash 3 D be devastated, too broken to fight back. He thought I, and hash 3 D let him and his family, and his mistress, and his attorney, take everything I, and hash 3 D worked for. He was wrong. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First, I called my attorney. Not a divorce attorney, not yet. My corporate attorney, James Chen, the man who in hash 3 D helped me structure my business, protect my assets, negotiate contracts worth millions, and quote, James it and hash 3 S Victoria. I need you to pull every document related to my marriage. Prenup, property deeds, bank account agreements, everything. And I need you to do it quietly. And quote, Victoria, it and hash 3 S 7 p.m. on a Friday. What? And hash 3 S going on. And quote, my husband is having an affair and planning to divorce me. His sister has connected him with an attorney. They, and hash 3 were planning to drain my accounts. I need to know exactly what he has access to and how to cut it off. Now. And quote, there was a pause. Then, and quote, I and hash 3 lo have everything by tomorrow morning. Don and hash 3 to do anything until we talk. Don and hash 3 T confront him. Don and hash 3 T move any money. Don and hash 3 T give him any indication you know. Can you do that? And quote, yes. And quote, good. Because if he and hash 3 is already consulting an attorney, he and hash 3 is probably been advised to start documenting everything. Every fight, every cold shoulder, every moment that makes you look like a bad wife. Don and hash 3 did give him ammunition. And quote, I hung up and made my second call. Mitchell Hayes, private investigator. I and hash 3 D used him twice. For the company wants to vet a potential business partner, wants to track down an employee who and hash 3 D stolen client data. He was expensive, discreet, and terrifyingly efficient. And quote, Mitchell, I need surveillance. My husband, I need to know everywhere he goes, everyone he sees, every transaction he makes. I need photos, videos, documented proof of an affair. And I need it to be admissible in court. And quote, how long has this been going on? And quote, 8 months, according to his texts. But I only found out today. And quote, I and hash 3 will start tomorrow. I and hash 3 will need his schedule, typical locations, vehicle information. Send it all, encrypted. And Victoria, Don and hash 3 done look at what I send you until you and hash 3 with your attorney. This kind of evidence. It and hash 3 S hard to see. And quote, I and hash 3 we already seen enough. And quote, my third call was to my accountant. Gerald Martinez had been handling my finances since I and hash 3 D started the company. He knew every account, every investment, every asset. And quote, Gerald, I need an emergency audit. Every account Mark has access to. Every transaction from the last year. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every unusual activity. And I need you to freeze my ability to add or remove authorized users on any account until further notice. And quote, that and hash 3 is going to take time, Victoria. And quote, you have until Monday. And quote, that and hash 3 is impossible. And quote, I pay you $15,000 a month. Make it possible. And quote, he sighed. And quote, I and hash 3 will have my team start tonight. And quote, I sat in my car after that, hands shaking with adrenaline. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something sharper, planning, strategy, the same skills I used to build campaigns for Fortune 500 companies, now redirected towards saving myself. Mark thought he was smart. He and Hash 3 D probably been planning this for months, maybe longer, getting his ducks in a row, consulting with attorneys, positioning himself for maximum gain. But he and Hash 3 D made one critical mistake. He and Hash 3 underestimated me. I drove home slowly, giving myself time to compose my face. By the time I pulled into our building and Hash 3's garage, I looked calm, collected, normal. The doorman greeted me, and quote, "Evening, Mrs. Ashford, Mr. Ashford, and Hash 3 not home yet," and quote, "client dinner," and quote, I said with a smile, and quote, "running late, as usual," and quote. I took the elevator to the penthouse, unlocked the door, and stepped into the home I and Hash 3 D bought, with money I and Hash 3 D earned before I even met Mark. The home that now had his name on the deed. Because I and Hash 3 D been stupid enough to think marriage meant trust. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the balcony, looking out over Lake Michigan. The water was dark, dotted with lights from boats. The city stretched out behind me, alive and indifferent to my pain. I didn't, and Hash 3 to drink the wine. I just held it, letting the glass grow warm in my hands. An hour later, Mark came home. I heard his keys in the door, his footsteps in the hallway, and quote, "Victoria, you home?" and quote, "out here," and quote. I called, keeping my voice light. He came out to the balcony, loosening his tie. He looked good, the bastard always looked good. The gym membership was paying off. He and Hash 3 probably been working out for her, getting in shape for weekend getaways and secret rendezvous. And quote, "How was your dinner?" and quote, I asked. And quote, "Long, boring. The head of orthopedics at Rush is a nightmare to deal with." And quote, he kissed the top of my head, a gesture that once made me feel loved, now made my skin crawl. And quote, "How was counseling?" and quote, I cancelled. And quote, he stiffened slightly. And quote, "Why?" and quote, "I wasn't," and Hash 3 T feeling well, migraine, rescheduled for next week, and quote, "Oh," and quote, he relaxed, and quote, "that," and Hash 3 too bad. I thought today might be a breakthrough session, and quote, I nearly laughed. A breakthrough. Yes, I and Hash 3 Die had a breakthrough today. Just not the kind he was expecting, and quote, "maybe next week," and quote, I said, and quote, "Are you hungry? I could order something," and quote, "Nah. I ate at the dinner. I and Hash 3 am just going to shower and head to bed. Long week," and quote, he disappeared inside. I heard the water running, his phone chiming with messages. He thought I could and Hash 3 tea here. I sat there on the balcony until my wine had gone completely warm, until the lake had turned from dark grey to black, until I and Hash 3 memorized every word of every text message that had played through my car speakers. Then I went inside, got into bed next to my husband, and pretended to sleep. The next morning, I woke up early. Mark was still asleep, one arm thrown over his face. I studied him in the dim light filtering through the curtains. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of building a life together, all of it a lie. I got up quietly and went to my home office, locked the door, pulled out a notebook, and started writing. Evidence gathered so far, 43 text messages between Mark and quote. Melissa, and quote, discussing affair, divorce plans, conspiracy with his family, knowledge of $8,450, Tiffany purchase for jewelry I never received. His location at luxury apartment building in River North, confirmed address. Visual confirmation of Mark, with younger blonde woman, wearing my birthday gift to him. Knowledge that his sister Rachel is connected to his divorce attorney. His mother Patricia is aware of affair and actively encouraging it. What I needed. Complete financial audit. In progress. Legal review of marital assets. In progress. Surveillance evidence. Starting today. Access to Mark and #3nine. Subcommunications. Need to figure out how to maintain car Bluetooth sync without his knowledge. Information about Melissa. Full name, employment, connection to Mark and #3nine. Family. Documentation of his family and #3nine. Is involvement in the conspiracy now. By 7 a.m. James Chen called, and quote, I and #3nine. V reviewed everything. Victoria, you and #3nine. In better shape than you think, but there are vulnerabilities. And quote, tell me, and quote, the prenup you signed is solid. In the event of divorce due to infidelity, he gets nothing from your premarital assets or business. But, and this is important, you made him a joint owner of the penthouse when you refinanced 2 years ago. That means he has a legitimate claim to half its value. Current market value is approximately $3.2 million. He could walk away with $1.6 million. And quote, my stomach dropped. I and #3nine. D put his name on the deed because he and #3nine. D made me feel guilty for not treating him like an equal partner. And quote, it and #3nine. Our home. And quote, he and #3nine. D said, and quote, our life together. How can I feel like a real husband if everything and #3nine in your name? And quote, what else? And quote, the joint checking account has $180,000 in it. He can legally withdraw up to half at any time. I and #3nine. To recommend moving your portion immediately. But that could tip him off that you know something in #3nine wrong. And quote, what if I just transfer it to my business account? Say it, and #3nine for quarterly taxes. And quote, that works. Do it Monday morning, first thing. Make it look routine. And quote, the investment accounts? And quote, those are solely in your name. He has no access. Same with your business accounts, your 401k, your stock portfolio. The only vulnerable assets are the penthouse and the joint checking. And quote, so, worst case scenario, he walks away with roughly $1.7 million. And quote, unless his attorney argues for alimony, you make significantly more than he does. In Illinois, alimony duration is typically calculated at 20% of the length of the marriage. You and #3nine. V been married 5 years. He could potentially claim 1 year of support at a percentage of your income. And quote, how much? And quote, ballpark? $150,000 to $200,000 total. Maybe more, if his attorney is aggressive and argues he sacrificed his career to support yours. And quote, I felt sick. $2 million. He could walk away with $2 million of my money for 5 years of lying to me. And quote, how do I protect myself? And quote, prove infidelity before he files. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, but the prenup specifically voids most of his claims if you can prove adultery. Get ironclad evidence, photos, videos, documentation of the affair. Then file first, fast and aggressively. Don and #3nin, to give him time to hide assets or build his case. And quote, I and #3nin, the already hired Mitchell Hayes. And quote, good, he and #3nin, the best. Victoria, one more thing, have you checked your credit report recently? And quote, not in about 6 months. Why? And quote, check it today. If he and #3nin planning to leave, he might be opening credit cards in your name, taking out loans, running up debt he plans to stick you with. And quote, Jesus Christ. And quote, I and #3nin am not saying he is. I and #3nin am saying check. Better to know now than discover it during divorce proceedings. And quote, I hung up and immediately pulled my credit report. Studied every line. 3 new credit cards I didn't and #3nin recognize. All opened in the last 4 months. All with my name, my social security number. 2 were maxed out $15,000 and $25,000 limits, both at their maximum. The third had $8,000 charged to it, $48,000 in fraudulent debt. I scrolled through the transaction details. The charges were for things I and #3nin never bought. Designer clothes from stores I and #3nin never shopped at. Restaurants I and #3nin never been to. A charge for $8,450 to Tiffany and Amp Co. He and #3nin opened credit cards in my name and bought his mistress jewelry with them. I sat back in my chair, breathing carefully. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The meditation technique my therapist taught me for managing anxiety. This was an #3nin anxiety. This was rage. Pure, crystalline rage. My phone buzzed. Mitchell Hayes. And quote, starting surveillance today. Subject left home at 9:15 a.m. Currently at Equinox Gym in River North. Female companion arrived separately at 9:30 a.m. Same facility. Will update with photos. And quote, 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, photos. Mark and Melissa leaving the gym together. Her hand in his back pocket, his arm around her shoulders, both of them laughing at something, completely at ease. Another photo, them getting into her car, a Mercedes GLE, expensive. Another photo, Mark leaning across the center console, kissing her. I forwarded everything to James with a single message, and quote, this, enough, and quote, his response, and quote, it and #3nin is a start. Need more. Need documentation of financial fraud. Need proof of conspiracy if his family and #3nin involved. Keep gathering. And quote, I spent the rest of Saturday documenting everything I knew, creating a timeline, building a case, the way I and #3nin to build a marketing campaign with data, evidence, and an unassailable narrative. Sunday morning, Mark announced he had to go into the office. And quote, on a Sunday? And quote, I kept my voice neutral. And quote, big presentation Monday. Need to prep. And quote, He was already dressed, already heading for the door. And quote, "Want me to bring you lunch?" And quote, he hesitated. And quote, "No, and hash threonine. I'll grab something. Don, and hash threonine. To wait up if and hash threonine. Am late." And quote, the moment he left, I called Mitchell. And quote, he just left. He, and hash 39, not going to his office. And quote, I know. I and hash threonine. On him. He and hash threonine. Heading north on Lakeshore Drive. I and hash threonine. Will update you. And quote, an hour later. And quote, subject arrived at luxury condo building, 345 W Fullerton. Same location as Friday. Entered with key. Female subject visible in window. Unit 2407. Running vehicle. Registration now. And quote, another hour. And quote, vehicle registered to Melissa Hartley. Age 28. Employed by Zenith Pharmaceuticals. Home address matches current location. Running background now. And quote, Melissa Hartley. Finally, a full name. I Googled her while I waited for Mitchell and hash threonine. Full report. LinkedIn profile. Melissa Hartley. Senior Pharmaceutical Sales Representative at Zenith Pharmaceuticals. Northwestern University. Bachelor and hash threonine. In Biology. 2019. She was 28. I was 36. 8 years younger. Facebook profile set to private. But the profile picture showed her with Mark at what looked like a charity gala. She was wearing a black dress, diamonds at her throat, the Tiffany necklace, the one bought with a credit card in my name. I screenshot everything. Mitchell and hash 39. Full report came through at noon. And quote, subject has no prior marriages, no children, employment verified, credit score 720, no red flags. Subject appears to have been in relationship with your husband for approximately 8 to 10 months, based on social media posts to friends, posts, reference, and hash threonine. Finally finding the one, and hash threonine, and hash threonine. New chapter, and hash threonine. Several photos geotagged it. Locations matching your husband and hash threonine. Business travel schedule. And quote, so she and hash threonine does been going with him. On trips, I and hash threonine. D. Paid for. Using company money I and hash threonine. D. Earned to fund their romantic getaways. At 4 p.m., Mark came home. And quote, how was work? And quote, I asked, from the couch, where I and hash threonine and been pretending to read. And quote, productive. Presentation and hash threonine. Ready. Should go well tomorrow. And quote, he was scrolling through his phone, smiling at something. Another text from her probably. Another, and quote, I love you, and quote, or and quote, can, and hash threonine, to wait to see you, and quote, or and quote, soon we, and hash threonine, be together, forever, and quote, that, and hash threonine, great, honey, want to order dinner, and quote, sure, whatever you want, and quote, we ordered Thai food. We ate on the balcony, making small talk about nothing. The weather. A show on Netflix. His mother and hash threonine. Upcoming birthday party. And quote, she wants to have a big celebration this year. And quote, Mark said. And quote, she and hash threonine. Turning 60. Thinking of renting out a restaurant. Doing it up nice. And quote, That sounds lovely. Of course we, and hash 3 will help pay for it. End quote. End quote. Really? End quote. He looked surprised. End quote. I thought, you, and hash 3 to complain about the cost. End quote. End quote. Mark, she, and hash 3 s your mother, it, and hash 3 s her 60th birthday. Of course we should celebrate. End quote. I smiled at him, and I watched him relax. He had no idea I knew his mother was part of the conspiracy, that she and hash 3 had been encouraging the affair, planning our divorce, probably already mentally spending whatever money they thought they and hash 3 get from me. Let them plan. Let them think I was oblivious. I was planning too. Monday morning, first thing, I transferred $90,000 from our joint checking account to my business account. Left him $90,000, exactly half. Can and hash 3 T accused me of stealing if I only took my share. Then I called my credit card companies, reported the fraudulent accounts, and filed police reports for identity theft. And quote, Ma and hash 3 do you know who might have opened these accounts? And quote, the officer asked. And quote, I have suspicions, but I need to gather more evidence before I make accusations. For now, I just need them flagged as fraudulent and the charges disputed. And quote, we and hash 3 open an investigation. In the meantime, we and hash 3 replacing a freeze on your credit. No new accounts can be opened without you physically appearing with identification. And quote, good. That would stop him from doing more damage. Tuesday, Mitchell sent me a full week and hash 3's worth of surveillance. Mark and Melissa went to the gym together 4 times. They had dinner at expensive restaurants 3 times, including one night when Mark had told me he was at a medical conference. They spent the night at her apartment twice when I and hash 3 had been told he had early morning meetings, and it made sense to stay at a hotel near the hospital. Every lie documented, every betrayal photographed. Wednesday, Gerald called with the full financial audit. And quote, Victoria, I found something. Over the past 8 months, there have been multiple transfers from your joint account to accounts belonging to Mark and hash 3's family members. Small amounts, $2,000 to $5,000 at a time, but they add up. Total transferred, $67,000. And quote, how is that possible? I check our accounts regularly. And quote, the transfers were made on days when large deposits came in from your business. They blend in with normal cash flow, unless you were looking specifically for them. You and hash 3 miss them. And quote, he and hash 3 had been systematically draining our joint account, hiding the transfers in plain sight. Betting I was too busy to notice small amounts disappearing when large amounts were coming in. And quote, where did the money go? And quote, $31,000 to Patricia Ashford, $22,000 to Robert Ashford, $14,000 to Rachel Ashford. All noted as and hash 3 family support and hash 3 or and hash 3 loan repayment and hash 3 though I can and hash 3 to find record of any loans. And quote, his entire family had been stealing from me. And quote, Gerald, I need you to document every single one of these transactions. Date, amount, recipient. I want a report that would hold up in court. And quote, you and hash 3 I'll have it by tomorrow. And quote, Thursday, I met with James in his office. and quote, I and hash 3nine, ready to file, and quote, I told him, and quote, I have proof of infidelity. I have proof of financial fraud. I have proof his family is involved. What and hash 3nine, our strategy, and quote, James leaned back in his chair, and quote, we file for divorce citing adultery, which voids most of his claims under the prenup. Simultaneously, we file a civil suit against Mark for identity theft and fraud for the credit cards. We file a motion to freeze the joint account, pending investigation. We petition the court to remove his name from the penthouse deed on the grounds that he was added through false pretenses. And we file criminal charges for the credit card fraud. And quote, can we go after his family too? And quote, for the $67,000 in transfers. It and hash 3nine. Complicated. He had legal access to the account. Unless we can prove they knew the transfers were being made without your knowledge or consent. It and hash 3nine. Hard to pursue criminally. But we can absolutely sue them civilly for return of the funds. And quote, do it. All of it. And quote, Victoria, once we file, this becomes war. He and hash 3nine will fight back. His family will fight back. It and hash 3nine, going to posent, get ugly. And quote, it and hash 3nine, already ugly. I just want to make sure I win. And quote, then we file Friday afternoon, late in the day, so he won, and hash 3nine. To have time to react before the first weekend. We and hash 3nine will have the papers served at his office. Public, embarrassing, and it puts you in control of the narrative. And quote, perfect. And quote, that night, Mark came home excited. And quote, great news. I landed that hospital account I and hash 3nine. We've been working on $40 million over 3 years. My commission is going to be huge. And quote, that and hash 3nine, wonderful. And quote, I hugged him, and he actually hugged me back. And quote, we should celebrate. Let me take you to dinner. And quote, really? You have time? And quote, for this? Absolutely. Let me make a reservation somewhere special. And quote, I took him to Gibson and hash 3nine, the restaurant, where, 3 months ago, he and hash 3nine, suggested marriage, counseling, where he and hash 3nine, convinced me I was the problem. We had expensive steaks and wine. We talked about his victory at work, about future plans, about how this commission would change things for us. And quote, maybe we could finally take that trip to Italy. And quote, he said. And quote, you and hash 3nine have been talking about it for years. And quote, that would be amazing. And quote, I watched him smile, watched him relax, watched him think everything was going according to his plan. Tomorrow, I and hash 3nine, burn that plan to the ground. Friday afternoon at 3:47 p.m., Mark and hash 3nine, phone started ringing. I know because mine synced to the car, Bluetooth, a feature I and hash 3nine, spent the week making sure stayed active. I and hash 3nine, been and quote, borrowing and quote, his pastry, phone to check the time when mine was charging, keeping the sync active without him, realizing he answered, and quote, hello, and quote, a professional voice, and quote, Mark Ashford. This is Martin Lewis, with Chen and Amp Associates. I and #39. M. Calling to confirm you and #39. We've been served with divorce proceedings filed by Victoria Ashford. Do you confirm receipt of the papers? And quote, silence. And quote, Mr. Ashford? And quote, yes, I just received them. And quote. The papers outline Mrs. Ashford and #39's allegations of adultery and financial fraud. You have 30 days to respond. I strongly advise you, retain legal counsel immediately. And quote. The call ended. My phone rang 5 seconds later. Mark. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. 12 times, he called. 12 times. I ignored him. Finally, a text. And quote, Victoria, what the fuck is this? Call me now. And quote, I didn't. And #39 to respond. At 5 p.m., my phone rang. Patricia Ashford, Mark, and #39's mother. I answered this time, my voice calm. And quote, hello, Patricia. And quote, what have you done? And quote, she was shrieking. And quote, how dare you humiliate our family like this? Mark is devastated. You file for divorce out of nowhere and accuse him of adultery. How dare you? And quote, Patricia, Mark has been having an affair with a woman named Melissa Hartley for 8 months. I have photos, videos, and documented proof. He also opened multiple credit cards in my name without my knowledge, committing identity theft and fraud, and I have evidence that you, Robert, and Rachel have been receiving unauthorized transfers from my accounts, totaling $67,000. So I and #39. D. Be very careful about what you say next, because I and #39 am currently deciding whether to include the entire Ashford family in my criminal complaints. And quote, silence. And quote, you have no proof of any of this. And quote, she finally said, her voice shaking. And quote, I have all the proof I need. Want me to send you the photos of your son kissing his mistress? Or would you prefer the credit card statements showing the jewelry he bought her with my stolen money? Or maybe the bank records showing $31,000 transferred to your personal account without my authorization? And quote, we and #39, re-family, Victoria, you and #39, re-supposed to forgive family. And quote, you stopped being my family the moment you helped your son destroy me. Tell Mark his belongings will be packed and moved to a storage unit. The locks on the penthouse will be changed by tomorrow morning. If he attempts to enter the property, I and #39 will have him arrested for trespassing. Oh, and Patricia, consider this your last invitation to anything in my life. Don and #39. Call me again. And quote, I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from triumph. The phone rang again. Rachel this time. Ignored. Robert. Ignored. Mark. Over and over. Ignored. At 6 p.m., Mitchell called. And quote, your husband just left his office with 2 large boxes. He looks angry. Where do you want me to follow him? And quote, wherever he goes, I want to know every move he makes. And quote, he and #39's heading north. Looks like he and #39's going to his parents and #39 house in Winnetka. And quote, of course he was. Running to mommy and daddy to plan their next move. At 7 p.m., my doorbell rang. The building and #39 S front desk, called up. And quote, Mrs. Ashford, there, and hash 3 S. A Mark Ashford here, demanding to be let up. He says he lives here, but his key is, and hash 3 T working, and quote, that, and hash 3 S correct. His key no longer works. He and hash 3 S been served divorce papers, and is no longer a Bell resident. If he refuses to leave, call the police and have him removed for trespassing. And quote, understood, Ma, and hash 3 am, and quote, at 8 p.m., my lawyer called, and quote, Mark and hash 3 S attorney just reached out. A man named Richard Stanton. He and hash 3 S his sister Rachel and hash 3 S contact exactly who we expected. He wants to negotiate, and quote, what, and hash 3 S he offering, and quote, he, and hash 3 S, claiming Mark, is willing to waive his claim to the penthouse and joint accounts in time in exchange for you dropping the fraud charges and not pursuing criminal prosecution. And quote, tell him Mark does, and hash 3 don't, get to negotiate. He committed crimes. He stole from me. He can accept the divorce terms I, and hash 3 V, offered, which are nothing, or we go to court, and I make sure every sordid detail becomes public record, his choice, and quote, he won, and hash 3 to like that, and quote, I don and hash 3 D care what he likes. He should have thought about that before he decided to steal from me and fuck someone else. And quote, Saturday morning, I woke up in my penthouse, not ours anymore, and felt lighter than I had in months. My phone had 7 missed calls and 89 text messages. I didn't, and hash 3 T read any of them. Instead, I got up, made coffee, and went out to the balcony. Lake Michigan stretched out before me, the morning sun turning the water gold. Mitchell called at 9 a.m. and quote, update. Mark spent the night at his parents' and hash 3 house. His car is still there. Melissa Hartley showed up at 7 a.m. She and hash 3 S inside now. And quote, so he and hash 3 D called his mistress to his parents and hash 3 house, bringing her into their family strategy session. Good. Let them all conspire together. Made the lawsuit easier. And quote, keep watching. I want to know everyone who comes and goes. And quote, at noon, Mitchell sent photos. Mark, his parents, Rachel, and Melissa, all sitting around the curtain. Ashford's and hash 3 dining room table. Papers spread out in front of them. Everyone looking stressed. At 2 p.m., Richard Stanton called my attorney again, and quote, my client is prepared to agree to all terms of the divorce with one condition. Mrs. Ashford signs a non-disclosure agreement preventing her from discussing the circumstances of the divorce with anyone, including social media, professional contacts, or mutual acquaintances. And quote, James called me immediately. And quote, he wants to silence you. And quote, absolutely not. I want the right to tell anyone and everyone exactly what he did. No NDA. And quote, he and hash 3 is going to fight this, Victoria. Without the NDA, he knows you, and hash 3 'll destroy his reputation. And quote, that, and hash 3 is exactly what I intend to do. Tell him if he does, and hash 3 T agree to my terms by Monday morning. I, and hash 3 am releasing a statement to all our mutual professional contacts, detailing his fraud and infidelity. Let, and hash 3 see how many hospital accounts he keeps when everyone knows he and hash 3 a liar and a thief. And quote, Sunday, Mark, and hash 3 aunt called me, his father, and hash 3 sister, Martha, a woman I, and hash 3 D always liked, and quote, Victoria, I heard what, and hash 3 happening. I just want you to know. I believe you. Mark, and hash 3 always been spoiled. Patricia and Robert enabled his worst behaviors his whole life. And Rachel and hash 3 always been manipulative. I, and hash 3 I'm not surprised they, and hash 3 all involved in this. And quote, Martha, I appreciate you calling. And quote, I also want you to know, Mark bragged to me at Christmas about his girlfriend. He showed me pictures. Said you were so busy with work you didn't, and hash 3 don't notice he was gone half the time. He thought it was funny. I told him he was disgusting, that he should either commit to his marriage or end it honorably. He laughed at me. And quote, will you testify to that, if needed? And quote, absolutely. That boy needs to learn. Actions have consequences. I, and hash 3 am sorry for what they, and hash 3 they, done to you. And quote, I added Martha to my witness list. Monday morning at 9 a.m., Richard Stanton called James with a new offer. And quote, Mark will agree to all divorce terms without the NDA if Mrs. Ashford agrees to drop the criminal charges for the credit card fraud. And quote, counteroffer. And quote, James replied. And quote, Mark agrees to all divorce terms, pays restitution for all fraudulent charges, returns all items purchased with stolen money, including jewelry given to Melissa Hartley, and his family returns the $67,000 transferred without authorization. In exchange, we drop the criminal charges, but maintain the right to pursue them if any term is violated, and Victoria retains full right to discuss the divorce however she chooses. And quote, he and hash 3 will never agree to that. And quote, then we, and hash 3 will see him in court. Discovery should be fun. I, and hash 3 am particularly looking forward to deposing Melissa and Mark and hash 3 entire family. And quote, at 2 p.m., Stanton called back. And quote, my client accepts your terms. And quote, just like that. Mark folded, because they all knew that going to trial would destroy them. Every detail would become public. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal. Mark would lose his job. His family would be humiliated. Melissa would be known as the other woman who wore stolen jewelry. They could, and hash 3 don't risk it. The next 6 weeks were a blur of paperwork, mediation sessions, and watching my old life dismantle itself. Mark returned $48,000 to cover the fraudulent credit card charges. His parents returned $31,000. Rachel returned $14,000, all paid in cashier and hash 3 checks, documented and legal. Melissa was required to return every piece of jewelry Mark had given her: the Tiffany necklace, earrings, a bracelet, a watch, all purchased with my money, all returned to me in a velvet bag that felt like a trophy. I didn't, and #3nin, keep any of it. I sold it all and donated the proceeds to a domestic violence charity. Let something good come from their betrayal. The penthouse remained solely in my name, Mark and #3nin. C. Claim was voided based on the fraudulent circumstances under which he and #3nin been added to the deed. The divorce was finalized 3 months after I filed. We never went to trial. Mark signed everything, took nothing except his personal belongings, and disappeared from my life. I heard through acquaintances that he moved to Indianapolis with Melissa, that he and #3nin taken a job with a smaller pharmaceutical company after Zenith fired him when the fraud charges became known in the industry. That his relationship with Melissa was already rocky, turns out. Being someone and #3nin's mistress is more fun than being their actual partner, especially when that partner is broke and disgraced. His family tried to reach out a few times. Patricia sent a letter claiming I and #3nin destroyed their son and #3nin's life, that I was cruel and heartless, that I and #3nin turned into someone unrecognizable. I didn't, and #3nin respond. She was, and #3nin worth my time. My company continued to thrive. Without the constant drain of Mark and #3nin's needs, his family and #3nin's demands, his lies and manipulation, I had energy to invest back into my business. We expanded to 2 new cities. Revenue increased by 40%. I promoted 3 employees to senior positions, invested in emerging technology, and won 2 industry awards. People asked me sometimes, colleagues, friends, the occasional brave acquaintance, what happened to my marriage? I told them the truth, every detail, every betrayal. I didn't, and #3nin hide behind polite euphemisms or vague, and quote, we grew apart, and quote, nonsense. My husband had an affair. He committed identity theft. He and his family stole from me. They conspired to destroy my business and leave me with nothing. And I caught them. I fought back. And I won. Some people were uncomfortable with my honesty. They thought I should be more discreet, more forgiving, more willing to, and, quote, move on, and, quote, quietly. Those people weren't an #3nin, my friends, anymore. The people who stayed: Maria, Catherine, Elena, Mitchell, James, even Gerald. They were the ones who understood. Who, and #3nin seen what I, and #3nin been through, and respected the fight I and #3nin waged. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was at a gallery opening in River North. My company had done the marketing campaign for the artist, and she and #3nin invited me to the opening night. I was standing in front of a painting, an abstract piece of broken mirrors reassembling themselves into something new, when someone spoke beside me. And quote, powerful piece. And quote, I turned. A man, maybe 40, with kind eyes and an easy smile, well-dressed, but not trying too hard. Wedding ring notably absent. And quote, it is. And quote, I agreed. And quote, I like the metaphor. Breaking apart does, and #3nin to mean staying broken. And quote, no, it does, and #3nin and quote, he extended his hand. And quote, Daniel Morrison. And quote, Victoria Ashford. And quote, the Victoria Ashford. I and #3nin heard amazing things about your company. We actually considered reaching out about a campaign for our tech startup, but we and hash 39 re not quite at scale yet. And quote, when you are, call me. I and hash 39. I'm always interested in innovative companies. And quote, we talked for an hour. About art, about business, about Chicago, about nothing and everything. When the evening ended, he asked if he could take me to dinner sometime. And quote, I and hash 39. D like that. And quote, I said. On our third date, he asked about my divorce, not prying, just making space if I wanted to talk about it. I told him everything. Waited to see if he and hash 39. D flinch, if he and hash 39. D judge, if he and hash 39. D decide I was too damaged, or too angry, or too much. Instead, he reached across the table and took my hand. And quote, I and hash 39. Sorry that happened to you. And I and hash 39. Impressed as hell that you survived it and came out aged stronger. And quote, you and hash 39. Were not worried I and hash 39. Some kind of vindictive monster. And quote, Victoria, you protected yourself from people who were actively trying to destroy you. That and hash 39. Not vindictive. That and hash 39. Self-preservation. Anyone who judges you for fighting back does and hash 39. Understand what it means to actually be betrayed. And quote, I fell a little bit in love with him right then. We and hash 39. We've been together for 8 months now, taking it slow, learning each other, building something real on foundation of honesty and mutual respect. He makes me laugh. He challenges me. He and hash 39 is proud of my success without being threatened by it. He has his own money, his own life, his own ambitions. He does and hash 39. Need me. He wants me. There and hash 39 is a difference. Last week, I ran into Mark and hash 39's mother at a fundraiser. She saw me across the room, and her face went white. She turned and walked the other way. Good. I hope every time she sees me for the rest of her life, she remembers what it cost her family to underestimate me. 2 nights ago, I was having drinks with Maria, my friend, who and hash 39 stood by me through everything, and she asked me the question I and hash 39 and been asking myself. And quote, do you regret it? The marriage? The time you spent with him? And quote, I thought about it. Really thought about it. And quote, no. And quote, I said finally. And quote, I regret trusting someone who didn't and hash 39 deserve it. I regret ignoring red flags. I regret not protecting myself better. But I don't and hash 39 don't regret the experience because it taught me something invaluable. And quote, what? And hash 39 that. And quote, that I and hash 39 am stronger than I ever knew. That I can survive anything. That I don and hash 39 need someone to complete me. I and hash 39 am already complete. And that the next time someone tries to use me, tries to take advantage of my success, or my generosity, or my trust, I and hash 39 will see it coming from a mile away. And quote, Maria raised her glass. And quote, to Victoria Ashford, the woman who turned her worst nightmare into her greatest comeback story. And quote, we clinked glasses. I am Victoria Ashford. I and hash 39 am 36 years old. I own a thriving marketing firm. I have an amazing man in my life who treats me like an equal partner. I have friends who showed up when it mattered. I have self-respect, boundaries, and a bullshit detector that, and #39, S been sharpened by experience. And I have the satisfaction of knowing that the people who tried to destroy me are living with the consequences of their choices every single day. Mark lost his career prospects, his reputation, and the woman he thought loved him, Melissa, left him 6 months after they moved to Indianapolis when she realized he was broke and damaged goods. His parents lost $31,000 and the respect of their extended family. Aunt Martha made sure everyone knew exactly what they and #39 done. Rachel lost $14,000 and her credibility. I made sure her employer knew about her involvement in fraud and identity theft. She was quietly let go 3 months later. They thought they could use me. They thought I was too busy, too trusting, too weak to fight back. They were wrong. Sometimes at night, I sit on my balcony, the balcony of the penthouse, that and #39, S, mine, all mine, and think about that day in my car when the Bluetooth synced and his messages played through my speakers. That was the worst moment of my life. The moment everything I believed about my marriage, my husband, my family, shattered into pieces. But it was also the moment I started fighting back. The moment I decided I was worth fighting for. If you and #39, rereading this, if you and #39, re-listening to this, and you and #39, re-going through something similar, I want you to know, you are not weak, you are not stupid, you are not at fault for someone else, and #39. S betrayal. What you are is strong enough to survive this, smart enough to gather evidence, brave enough to fight back. Don and #39. To let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. Don and #39. To let anyone convince you that fighting for what and #39 says yours makes you vindictive or cruel. You have every right to defend yourself against people who are actively trying to harm you. And when you win, not if, when you and #39 look back on this moment as the beginning of your real life. The life where you and #39 not performing for someone who does and #39 to value you. The life where you set the terms. The life where you finally, truly, breathe. Trust your instincts. Document everything, fight back, and never, ever let anyone make you feel weak for being strong. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story gave you the justice you needed to see, check out the other videos on screen. They and #39 read just as satisfying. And if you haven't and #39 subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? See you in the next story.